Story 1. Feeling unappreciated and underpaid drains your soul faster than any workload ever could. Story 2. Responsibility without authority. You are expected to complete the work, but you must ask permission to perform basic job functions. If you cannot get the right approval and fail to finish the work, you are blamed. Bonus points if the person you must ask is utterly clueless about your job. Story 3. Seeing the lazy, stupid, underskilled, unqualified nepotism hire get rewarded and promoted while doing none of the work. Story 4. Lack of direction. How am I supposed to work if my boss does not even know what they want me to do? Story 5. Fucking with someone's money, promising a raise and not giving it or under-delivering. Promising a promotion track and not delivering. False promises of being able to improve your life if you keep working harder. Story 6. Rewarding hard work with extra work is the quickest way to make someone stop caring about their work. Story 7. There is no incentive. I'm not going to work hard when I'm paid the same amount to do the bare minimum. Story 8. Toxic leadership. Favoritism. Stagnant wages. New hires paid the same as employees with 5 years service. Being overworked because corporate refuses to hire additional staff to save money, while chief executive officers still receive bonuses. Co-workers who complain excessively. Unrealistic expectations. Senior employees using their length of service to refuse tasks. Seniority used to mistreat new employees. New employees receive no support. Lazy co-workers favored by management. High turnover rates. Story 9. Poor management, lack of support, and being told only what they do wrong rather than what they do right. Story 10. I realized that working harder gets you nowhere, especially when you are salaried. Story 11. You were never told what you were doing right. You were only bombarded with what you were doing wrong. Story 12. Bad managers. I loved my job and was very good at it. My manager for years handled their responsibilities so I could focus on my strengths, and we had a great working relationship. One day, the chief executive officer reorganized management. I have spoken up and tolerated the changes, but now I do the bare minimum because the paycheck is the same. Story 13. Narcissistic abuse aims to undermine the self-esteem of people so they believe they cannot do better. Story 14. Watching someone with less knowledge or experience become your boss happened to me. I told him to his face that I did not and would not respect him or treat him like a boss. I did not care. He needed to hear it. Story 15. Micromanagement or being treated without distinction between low-performing and high-performing employees. Story 16. Being poorly trained and then blamed because you are not learning fast enough. Story 17. Vibe coder man children are in charge. Venture capital seems to love giving millions of dollars to talentless 20-year-olds who string together a series of buzzwords. They often lack technical skill, interpersonal skills, and professional experience, yet after conniving to get money from larger fools, they convince themselves they are geniuses. Spoiler alert. Anyone can raise venture capital and squander it. Story 18. It is incompetent and unprofessional when managers turn a blind eye to friends who break the rules, but come down hard on everyone else. Story 19. A supervisor who has never done the job they now supervise and is interfering with systems that work. Story 20. A micromanaging boss who knows less about the details than the workers but insists on things being done their way. Small disruptions in the workflow, never large enough to require intervention but enough that you must work harder because the work was not planned efficiently. Story 21. Their expertise was neither used nor respected, and stakeholders altered the vision. Story 22. Being followed into the bathroom while using the toilet because someone thought you were taking too long. Not being able to speak with your doctor when they call. Being accused of something you did not and would never do. Feeling like your human rights were violated. Story 23. When I can't connect with my colleagues because their mentality and values do not resonate with me at all, I quit without second guessing. I want to work with people who charge me as much as I charge them. Story 24. I used to think that losing motivation at work was simply about money. For me, it was something deeper. The feeling of being misled, ignored, and taken for granted. I worked at a well-known nonprofit organization as a landscape technician. During the interview, I asked how many people were on the team. My director told me there were 5. Once I started working, I realized I was the entire landscape team. I was the one mowing, fixing irrigation, pruning, planning, and running daily operations, plus handling administrative and financial duties. I was basically acting as supervisor, laborer, and mechanic at the same time. I stayed because the job came with a lot of freedom and independence, and I took pride in what I did. Over time, everything changed. Because of budget cuts, they started giving me extra responsibilities that had nothing to do with landscaping. One day, I was assisting with events. Another day, I was helping the chief executive officer assistant set up board meetings. Some days I was expected to fix equipment in the shop, forklifts, tractors, and maintenance of whatever broke. As people left, they were not replaced, so my workload increased and preventive maintenance tasks were not getting done. It slowly became clear that the organization was happy to let me carry more and more weight without recognition. Then came the all-staff meeting. Leadership announced that the organization was operating in the red and they would stop giving raises of 0.5%. Meanwhile, directors were making 6-figure salaries and the chief executive officer was earning $270,000. That day, something inside me shut down. Not because I envied them, but because it became clear they did not value the people doing the real work on the ground. My breaking point came when I started being invited to administration and leadership meetings. I was a landscaper sitting in those rooms because everyone relied on me, yet I was still paid like the lowest worker. They respected the work, but not enough to honor it. That was when I knew I had to move on, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Motivation dies the moment you realize your effort is being used but not acknowledged. The moment you see your contribution but they only see the convenience of you doing everything. That is when you stand up and leave. Story 25. Watching unprofessional coworkers face no consequences for their poor behavior. Story 26. The sense that your individual effort does not impact results. Story 27. Poor leadership. Nobody wants to work for an abrasive bully who belittles staff from behind. People will go to great lengths to help a manager who leads from the front and does the same tasks they ask their subordinates to do. Story 28. Bad management, low pay, a large pay gap between workers and upper management, and being forced to work in the office for jobs that could be performed just as well at home. Story 29. Micromanagement, repetitive tasks, lack of appreciation, and, for passionate workers, a lack of challenges. Story 30. Seeing coworkers leave in large numbers is demoralizing. Motivation after a reduction in force is gone. We then had a voluntary separation program to further cut costs. 7 of the 10 people on my team have left in the last 9 months, and that includes me as of tomorrow. Once colleagues you have worked with for 10 to 20 years start leaving, and 1 or 2 depart on their own terms each week, it's pretty much over. I lasted 2 months after the voluntary retirement program. I just couldn't find motivation. Story 31. I worked at a call center where the team lead would get so angry she literally yelled loudly enough that half the floor could hear. I understood she had upper management breathing down her neck about numbers, but when customers could hear and actually ask if she was okay, it showed it was not just in someone's head, as human resources would try to claim. Story 32. I was passed over for a promotion and did not address the reasons or how to improve before the next opportunity. Story 33. I am overworked. I work in inventory at a store and they expect us to do everything. Stock shelves, track down missing items, ship off old product, prepare deliveries for customers, load customer orders, run items to customers doing curbside pickup, perform stock counts, load and unload trucks full of product, set up displays and shelving for new product, use and troubleshoot. The computer systems we were not taught, perform safety checks on equipment, pack shipments, check outbound deliveries, identify unlabeled appliances in the warehouse and sometimes spend 30 to 60 minutes researching them, determine anti-theft requirements for specific items, regularly lift heavy objects weighing 100 to 150 pounds, and many other tasks. We usually have only 2 people scheduled, so we are expected to complete the work of about 8 people in a single day, which never happens. I never take a lunch break or even a 15-minute break because of the workload. I am always speed walking all day. I have wanted to quit multiple times and it does not get better. In fact, the better we do, the more work we get because management assumes our strong results mean we can take on more. I would like to say the pay is good, but it is not. Story 34. Having to train someone new in the same role who earns considerably more than you do. Story 35. Bad bosses. In my experience, many people can stomach hard work, long hours, and low pay more easily than a bad boss. A poor manager can make people quit otherwise good jobs, while strong leadership can keep people in worse positions. Nobody wants to be bossed around by a toxic supervisor. Story 36. It is not usually the work itself. It is the feeling that what you are doing does not matter. You can handle long hours or tough projects if you feel appreciated and see some purpose behind them. When it starts to feel like you are just another cog, when no one notices your effort or your growth stalls, motivation dies quickly. Story 37. For me, it is boredom. I like to go in each day with purpose. Story 38. Nothing changes when issues and suggested solutions are raised. More work is being piled on, and there are no rewards or benefits for completing it. Story 39. For me, coworkers matter. I want to interact with other people, not people who only see themselves as workers. At many jobs I have had, people do not make basic conversation, do not act decently, and are unproductive all day. If you find a job with good people who will talk and banter, you will have a decent job. Even if things go badly, you will have coworkers who are in it with you. Story 40. Feeling unappreciated and having coworkers getting paid more despite knowing they aren't doing half the work you do. Story 41. Watching other employees get away with doing zero. I work in residential care for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities in a home with 2 residents. The other staff member spent 4 of the 8-hour shift on his phone, then left 3 hours early with no consequences. I had to do all the work. He also blew up at me and screamed in front of one of the residents, which violates policy. Tell me why I should do anything at work. Story 42. When the president's favorite little bitch, a short dude, gets preferential treatment without providing any value. Story 43. I believe I cannot make someone happy or motivate them, but I can make them unhappy or demotivated. You can also make yourself unhappy or demotivated without any help. I learned that leadership makes the difference between a company succeeding and failing. Because I was inherently lazy, I depended on those who worked for me. I focused on them, not on the work. If someone seemed a little off, I would find a reason to check in. Sometimes you never know unless you ask. I did not rely on an open-door policy. I went to them. I did not have a problem with motivated staff because I valued and needed them and made no secret of it. My advice to anyone who wants to lead is to walk the walk and talk the talk every day. Story 44. Being told their work, input, and opinions do not matter. Being in a supposed leadership role while having no agency or budget authority and being micromanaged. Story 45. Winning the lottery. Discovering you are terminally ill. Finding out that your job is making the world worse comes in third. Story 46. Lip service. Words said repeatedly that do not match actions. Rhetoric about excellence and inspirational quotes, but results that predictably disappoint and fail to live up to the hype. Leadership offers no explanations or apologies that show ownership or self-reflection. Instead, they blame others and demand better teamwork or more sacrifice. They assign projects, then take credit for others' work or ignore it and unilaterally choose a different, arbitrary direction without explanation. Story 47. When you are the type of person who works hard and does a good job, you receive more work. People who slack off do not receive as much work, yet they are paid the same. Story 48. When you are doing 50 to 100% or more work than higher-ranking staff and getting paid less, do not accept it. I left 2 companies for that reason and learned my worth. Never again. If I am a top producer and someone else is paid more for doing less, I will leave. Story 49. Broken promises. You exceed metrics and are promised a 30% annual bonus, but receive a Jelly of the Month club instead. Time to leave. Story 50. I can't stay motivated at any job where there is nothing to achieve or complete or where achievements and goals are arbitrary. For example, I could never work in a factory, a typical office job, or a store because there is no real goal. You just punch in and keep doing the same thing until it is time to leave. I thrive in project-oriented fields and roles with commission-based pay. If money is the sole motivator, so be it. I'd rather it not be, but a goal is a goal. I realize it is kind of silly to say I cannot work in an office when I spend 25 to 40% of my time in one. I suppose I mean I could not do data entry or clerical work. Any job that is never done I cannot handle. Story 51. When it is a team-oriented work environment but they make you feel excluded or act as if they do not need you. Story 52. Not being seen is why I like and appreciate open kitchen restaurants. Story 53. Feeling like you are doing everything right and still being treated like you are invisible. Nothing kills motivation faster than working hard while your boss treats good job as a luxury. Meetings that could have been emails are also demotivating. Story 54. A company I worked for posted a memo that I would summarize as follows. To all employees, please complete your tasks by their due dates, even if that requires working extra hours. If you finish tasks early, you are responsible for finding additional work to complete. This was before email. It was a salaried position. Overtime was unpaid. I found a better job a few months later. The company went out of business within a year. Story 55. You are not getting paid for 6 weeks, while your peers are at home and will receive the same paycheck. Story 56. Complaining coworkers. Simply being there is enough torture. Find coworkers who make the most of it or try to be that person yourself. Story 57. The way you are treated by management. People who should not be in their positions act as if they are entitled. Story 58. When effort goes unnoticed and you feel undervalued, motivation fades quickly. Story 59. I used to love helping people with computers and information technology, but the politics behind the scenes took their toll. The unwillingness to implement better systems or even minor quality of life improvements for both information technology staff and end users sapped my motivation. After several more incidents, I let broken systems remain to show they would not hold up to temporary duct tape fixes. That led to blame without solutions, and I disengaged completely. Story 60. This combination occurs when the boss and management are doing things wrong and when you feel your suggestions are ignored. A deadly combination. If that happens, I mentally check out and do just what I'm asked, nothing more, to get my paycheck. Then I slowly look for a better job. It only happened once in my career. 3 months after I left, the business went down. It was a startup. That was oddly satisfying, though unfortunate for my former colleagues. I believe everyone rebounded well since then. Story 61. Usually it is the company policies set by those who stand to gain from exploiting you, failing to recognize and reward the extra value you bring when giving 110%. Because the management mantra is, do more with less. Any productivity increase they can get from their workforce is converted into share price and dividends for shareholders. Unless you yourself have a vested financial interest in your output, for example profit sharing, stock options, or output-linked bonuses, or if going the extra mile will demonstrably lead to a reward such as a promotion, allowing your work-life balance to be compromised is setting yourself up for misery. Story 62. Bad coworkers and management are problems regardless of job or type. Story 63. There comes a point when you realize the company you work for has no gatekeeping for supervisors, managers, and other administrators. Your boss is likely less competent than you or your colleagues, but they are good with compliance. Story 64. I discovered it was a dead-end job and resigned from a warehouse position a few weeks ago when I learned that being too good at one task meant I would do only that task indefinitely. Some coworkers had done the same job for 5 years or even 10 years. As someone who had been there for 2 years, initially to get by until something better came along, I realized there was no real path to anything better than my current situation. I left as soon as I had another job offer in hand. Story 65. Favoritism and loss of composure in leadership. When a leader loses their composure, it is hard to view them as a leader because it suggests they are not equipped to handle the situation and appear fragile. Story 66. When many coworkers call in sick because of job stress and low or non-existent pay, and the head honcho threatens to fire them, you will not be eager to go to work. If you feel like this might be the day you snap or make a mistake that cannot be fixed, you should go home and call in sick. Sean Duffy is a clown. Story 67. They know that no matter how hard they work, they still cannot afford anything. Story 68. I used to work for a malpractice insurance company, and both of my immediate supervisors arrived late and left early. When I transferred to the Human Resources Department, I was surprised to find that they recorded on their time cards that they worked 40 hours each week, despite only working 5 to 6 hours per day, Monday through Friday. I verified they were not salaried before reporting their time clock fraud. Both were fired, and replacement supervisors were hired. Employee satisfaction on anonymous quarterly reports rose from 61% to 93%. Story 69. Colleagues who do not pull their weight but still get rewarded, or who constantly leave work for others. Missing equipment or tools that were never provided. Unrealistic expectations about how long tasks will take to complete. Story 70. I quickly lose motivation to stay in a job when I am constantly micromanaged, especially when I am one of the hardest working employees in my department. Story 71. Micromanagement. Not enough work. Poor management and leadership. Underpaid. No working from home. Story 72. Favoritism occurs when brown-nosing is rewarded over productivity. Story 73. I left because I was underpaid, unappreciated, faced a lack of loyalty from my supervisor, and was taken advantage of. Additionally, there were no merit raises during the 11 years I worked there. Story 74. Bad management. There is a saying that the fish begins to rot from the head. I never left companies because of the company. I left because of a useless boss or manager. Now that I am the boss, I have not lost motivation for my job. Story 75. Supervisors who are not leaders simply collect a paycheck. They avoid making decisions and have no sense of what is going on. Story 76. Low pay and watching everyone else receive praise while you do not. Story 77. Constant layoffs, but oh look, there is pizza in the break room. Story 78. For me, it is the lack of basic human interactions, such as never being offered a coffee, never being asked to take a break together, and not having people say hello or goodbye. It may seem trivial, but we spend most of our day at work and we are human. Of course, there are types of jobs where this is not possible, such as fully remote jobs, but I hope you understand my point. Story 79. Seeing people get away with poor performance and easier tasks killed my team's motivation. Story 80. The people you are forced to be around day after day. Some will be cool. Some will be incredibly annoying. Story 81. As someone about to be furloughed, being forced to use vacation time while unable to go anywhere really motivates employees when they come back to work. Story 82. I went from being highly respected and treated as if I walked on water to not being respected. I changed jobs to double my pay. After a few things started to break, someone reached out and I told them it was beyond their skill set and a skill that is nearly impossible to hire for. Story 83. I work for a company that keeps giving us pay rises, which is good, but then they cut hours and make the job much harder. Expectations remain the same, but with fewer people working fewer hours per shift. I am trapped in a job I used to enjoy. It has become a job I hate. I am earning well enough, and in a world where both jobs and wages are in short supply, I am stuck with it. The strange, I never thought getting a pay rise would end up making me so angry. Story 84. When they are underpaid, when there is micromanagement, and when the work environment is hostile. Story 85. I am exhausted. I fall asleep after work. My weekends are spent recovering. Story 86. Colleagues you do not get along with, a boss who demands too much, and exhausting work within human hours. Story 87. Coworkers use them all the time to clean up their messes and save themselves. I am so done. Story 88. When someone else does less but is rewarded for lazy behavior. Story 89. Knowing they are actively doing the least they can to keep you from quitting. Story 90. Most jobs make it hard to stay motivated. Only a lucky few find work with purpose and good management. Story 91. Being interviewed and hired for a job with certain expectations about required skills, knowledge, experience, and aptitude, only to find the role requires significantly less than you can offer, is frustrating. There are no promotion opportunities, no bonus or compensation structure, and management is poor. Story 92. For me, it is that the job does not change with the times and requires unnecessary work simply because it has always been done that way. Story 93. Realizing that no matter how well or poorly they perform, or how much effort they put in, the result is always the same. Nothing changes. Story 94. Being surrounded by toxic coworkers who constantly make negative comments about others. Story 95. Lack of motivation to work because of delayed payments from the bosses. Story 96. If people show up and do not complete their work, do the work. Story 97. There are 3 things I have seen that are incredibly demotivating. 1. People who are promoted despite not deserving it and cannot do the job, generally because of nepotism or internal politics. 2. Jealous management. For example, I recently completed a trip where a customer rented a private jet to transport us to several sites. At previous companies I worked at, I would have been fired for managers who did not contribute anything but wanted to ride in the private jet and leave an upset customer. 3. Time wasters. For example, a company might have a policy they dislike, so we have to do a task twice. Once the correct way and once the way they insist on. I have worked at some terrible companies. Story 98. Finding out a coworker earns twice as much when you work longer hours and commute farther. Story 99. When the goalposts are always moving. When layoffs are always on the horizon. Rude, hypocritical management. Story 100. I was told I had too much initiative because I fixed problems before they became serious, or because I fixed something others didn't realize was a problem. Having a problem employee that no one in management will do anything about because he does his work, which seems to excuse his poor attitude and mistreatment of other employees. Knowing what I'm talking about when people ask me for advice, then being ignored in favor of someone else's idea or temporary fix that doesn't work. When that fails, it becomes my problem to fix. Working in maintenance in general. We keep the place running and provide the experience for guests or customers, yet we're often the first to be criticized by people who cannot comprehend even a fraction of what it takes to maintain a functioning facility for employees to use every day. If it weren't for maintenance teams, there would be no jobs. No one seems to understand or care. Story 101. Working bottom-of-the-barrel jobs, for example customer service, which is the backbone of many companies, can leave you feeling like you have no control over your life. You cannot use paid time off until you have been there for months, and you cannot take time off for emergencies without risking being replaced. You are forced to accept the company's poor policies because you need a paycheck to survive. Story 102. Disrespect for the skills and experience you bring to the workplace. Story 103. Poor leadership is the root cause of almost everything external to oneself. Story 104. Despite being told repeatedly how crucial you are to the company, your contract is not being renewed because of financial reasons. Fuck my life. Story 105. I am being micromanaged by people who are out of touch with operational realities. Story 106. Wealthy owners, underpaid staff, and negative environmental impact. Story 107. Boring work, feeling underutilized, asking for more but not receiving it, and a passive manager. Story 108. A lack of progress in your career is demoralizing. Companies make it worse with soulless corporate jargon that insults your intelligence. Story 109. It was a huge responsibility and a significant proven contribution, but there was no financial reward or promotion, only a pat on the back and a thank you. The chief executive officer once tried to explain that money is not the most important thing in life. He has 50 times more equity. I was the first hire after the founders. I want to hear that from my father or a therapist, not from him. Our relationship exists because he is supposed to pay me. Story 110. The beatings will continue until morale improves. Management that never recognizes individual performance, growth, and development instead rules by fear. Story 111. Poor leadership and a board of directors pressured by investors to deliver unending stock growth lead to having to do much more with less and a persistent culture of scarcity. Story 112. You do a great job and your reward is more work because you are competent. Story 113. Watching substandard employees treated as if they are special and poor performance is acceptable. Seeing inadequate performers cause problems while management holds everyone accountable as if we are being punished in grade school, even when we had nothing to do with it. Not supporting drivers when professional driving is part of the job. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.